Welcome back, everybody. It's been a little while since I posted a video. Just thought I'd update you on what I've been working on. So this is a Jurassic Park Jeep. We bought this in 2016 because my wife absolutely loves Jurassic Park. And it wasn't a Jurassic Park Jeep when we bought it. It was just a regular YJ Jeep Wrangler. We did all the work to convert it into what you see here. We've still got a few more things to do, but you know, it's a work in progress. What we hadn't done is any of the mechanical work to it. We just sort of made it pretty. You know, we added all the Jurassic Park stuff and we painted it. We redid the interior, new old stock fabric, new carpet, just, you know, all the things to make it nice and pretty. But we hadn't really done anything underneath the vehicle or under the hood. So in January, some things started giving out. Now, we'd had a little problem with some of the wheel weights coming off. We use sticky weights because we don't want to mark up the aluminum rims or scratch the paint every time we get the wheels balanced. So some of the sticky weights were flying off. They weren't sticking very well. And that caused a tire imbalance problem and kind of a vibration when you were driving it. So that was the first thing that kind of started to go. And then in January, the battery died. Now, the battery was a 2013 battery, which is actually before we even owned the vehicle. And it finally gave out and needed replaced. Let me see if I can get the hood open here. All right. So here we go. That's the new battery. We picked a OPTIMA, which is a AGM, absorbent glass mat sealed battery. It doesn't gas out, so you never get corrosion around the positive cable, which is really nice. Your battery tray doesn't rust out or anything like that. And this yellow one will have enough reserve power to run the extra lights and the winch and things like that that a Jurassic Park Jeep has. So in addition to replacing the battery, we also had to replace the battery cable. The original cable was badly corroded and the end had already been chopped off and replaced once. And we wanted to, well, we do nicer work than that. So along with replacing the positive cable, we went ahead and replaced the negative cable also, the ground cable. And the ground cable, both wires on it, for some reason, were connected to the engine. So someone had connected them wrong. So the engine was grounded and none of them went to the body to ground the body. You know, the Jeep wouldn't work very well like that. And so what we found was that the Jeep was being grounded through a redundant ground strap, which is on the back of the engine, connects the engine to the firewall. You can see it right here. It's kind of shiny stuff right there. So everything was grounding through that ground strap, and the ground strap was kind of frayed too. They don't tend to last very long. So I replaced that ground strap also with a good cable and connected its connecting point on the firewall to the correct location for the ground strap on the firewall right here. So now we have the body thoroughly grounded and the engine grounded like it's supposed to be. We were also missing the battery hold down. We had the wrong one, just some kind of an aftermarket something that someone had thrown on there. We went ahead and tracked down the correct battery hold down. So with that buttoned up, we went on a test drive. Unfortunately, the test drive was not successful. So what happened is it just kind of revved high and then it sputtered a lot and eventually it would die. And you could restart it, but it would repeat the same thing. It would just sort of randomly get high RPM and it didn't seem related to the gas pedal at all. It's like the gas pedal was totally unresponsive. So we ended up towing it home, and I worked on it some more. The place where I started looking for that issue was the throttle position sensor, and that is right here on the throttle body. So this is the air cleaner. Air comes in here to the throttle body. Throttle position sensor is right here. Throttle cable is this one, I believe, right here, and the other one is your, I got that backwards. This one's the throttle cable. This one is the automatic transmission kickdown linkage. All right, so this actually connects the pedal to the throttle body, and this tells the computer, the throttle position sensor tells the computer how far open the throttle body is, so the computer knows how much gas to give it to go with the air that you're putting in with your foot. So I checked out the throttle position sensor because the gas pedal seemed totally unresponsive. It checked out okay. I also checked out the MAP sensor, manifold absolute pressure. That's this one right here. It also tells the computer what the, I guess kind of like what the vacuum is for the engine, what it's running at. You know, are you pushing it hard or are you not pushing it hard? So I checked that out. It checked out okay also. Disconnecting them made a code show up on the check engine light, and that's normal. It just means they lost signal for a little while. So those things weren't really the problem. What I ended up finding was a vacuum leak right here. This little rubber elbow was bad, where it connects into the fuel pressure regulator. So it was sucking air, and once I replaced that with a new little rubber elbow from the parts store, then it no longer had the random high revving issue. So as a result, it died much more consistently. So after fixing that issue, then you could start it up at around about 3 seconds, and then it would just die. So fixed half the problem with that elbow there. After that, it was figuring out, well, why is it only running for 3 seconds? Starts fine, won't run. I went ahead and replaced the throttle position sensor and the MAP sensor, just for good measure. They're relatively cheap, and you know, parts aren't available forever. This is a 27-year-old vehicle, and I don't know if I'll be able to get them in the future. So since I could, and I was already working on it, I went ahead and put them on. The next thing I did was look into the idle air control valve. So that is this one right here. It's also on the throttle body. It controls how much air gets into the engine at idle. So your foot controls, you know, regular throttle, or your air, with the gas pedal in the throttle body here. But this controls how much air you get at idle, and it's computer controlled. It just plugs in. So I took that out and cleaned out. It kind of gets carboned up and dirty in there, gets clogged, and so you know that can be an issue. So I took that out. I actually took the whole throttle body off, cleaned it, put a new gasket on, put a new O-ring on the idle air control valve, and well, I'm sure that was a good thing to do because it was dirty. It did not fix the problem. The next thing I did was I kind of got off on a tangent here. The positive crankcase ventilation right here, that was busted around the base, and it was, you know, leaking oil. And this one over here, it had been busted off also. So I went ahead and replaced both of those. I got new grommets and new valves to go into them, and hopefully the engine won't have as much oil on top of it now. And while that was a good thing to do, it wasn't really related to the problem. It was just sort of something else that was wrong. So yeah, it's a 27-year-old vehicle, and there's some things that previous owners have either not fixed quite the way I would have liked or not fixed at all, and they need done. So stuff like that. So next, as far as figuring out why it wasn't running, I hooked up a fuel pressure gauge. Now that hooks up to the Schrader valve right here. You just unscrew that cap, and then you hook the fuel pressure gauge on and see what's going on when you start the vehicle. And that showed me no fuel pressure. Well, obviously that's a problem. Now I knew I had a little bit of fuel because the vehicle was starting, but it wasn't running. It wouldn't run more than 3 seconds. So I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I disconnected the supply line to the fuel rail. That's this one right here. So the gas comes out of the fuel tank into the fuel rail right here. And this rail is connected to all the fuel injectors that go into the engine. There's 6 of them. This is a 6-cylinder engine, 4.0. So I did have fuel coming out of the supply line when I had it disconnected, so I could visibly see fuel. I had to short the relay, fuel pump relay over there in the box to make it run, rather than just, you know, turn the key on and off. I just shorted out the relay there. A small piece of wire, no big deal. So I could see the fuel come out. I knew fuel was coming out. The pump did work, but it wasn't building pressure. So I was like, is the rail clogged, or, you know, what's going on? So I connected this one back up. I disconnected this one. This is the return line to the tank for excess fuel. When I did that, I seemed to have fuel going into the rail, but I didn't have anything coming out, no return, and no building pressure. So either the rail was clogged, which isn't very likely, or the pump just isn't providing enough pressure to build the pressure. Even though I can see some fuel coming out, the pump isn't pumping enough fuel. So the next thing I went to do was check out the fuel filter, because obviously if the fuel filter is clogged, then you don't get any fuel. So that's down here. Oh, it's pretty dark under here. All right, maybe I can get a light. There we go. So that's the fuel filter. I did remove the filter, and I bought a new filter because we had never changed it since we owned the vehicle. So I was hoping that would fix the problem. Unfortunately, it did not. But having a good fuel filter, a nice new clean one, is a good idea. And I put new hoses on it and new clamps. And that rear hose back there, this is actually the old hose for this elbow-shaped one, 90-degree turn there. That's a special hose. It's 5/16 on the end that connects to the vehicle, and 3/8 inside diameter on the end that connects to the fuel filter. Now, I have a new one that I had to order, but I haven't quite installed it yet. It's sitting in the house. And the fuel filter clamp here, you can see that's the bottom half, but there's not a top half. So that was missing, something that a previous owner removed and never put back on. I've tracked one of those down. I'm going to get it powder coated before I install it. Along with, there's a big shield that goes around this to protect it when you're off-roading. It's metal also, and I'm going to have it powder coated. And installing everything with stainless screws here. They're perfectly fine. Stainless is a softer metal than steel, regular steel, but they're fine for holding this stuff on. And they won't corrode. So the fuel filter was not the issue. I went ahead and hooked the fuel pressure gauge up back here to the line and shorted out the fuel pump again to run it and check the pressure back here. And we had like 5 pounds of pressure or something. It was ridiculously low. We were supposed to have about 30, I think it was. So yeah, not enough. 5 pounds would be fine for a carburetor, but it doesn't work for fuel injection. While I'm sitting here, let's look at these little snubbers. Let me come out from under the vehicle, I guess. Okay, so here we have this bumper here. This is called a snubber. It mounts to the frame, and this is actually a traction control device. So when you hit the gas really hard, what happens is the wheels, of course, are turning, and the drive shaft is turning and everything. So the nose of the rear end, the differential, comes up like this. So you have this sort of a fight between the different forces at work here. And so either the differential is going to spin clockwise from the way we're looking at it now, or the tires are going to spin counterclockwise and propel the vehicle. So what happens is the differential goes up until it hits something or can't, and then the tires spin, which moves you forward. So the purpose of this is a traction control device. When the axle rotates upward, the leaf spring actually goes up here and hits that. Now, you wouldn't have enough force to do that under light acceleration, but if you're, really getting on it and you've got a lot of power in the vehicle, this could actually go up and hit that bumper, or snubber as they call it. So yeah, that shaves a few fractions of a second off your quarter-mile time, right? Anyway, so the next thing we had to work on was the fuel pump, because, well, looks like the fuel pump's the problem, right? There's no fuel pressure. That's an issue. So, to work on the fuel pump, you have to take out the fuel filler hose and the vent hose, which are up in here. We were having problems with it splashing gas out when we refilled it, so we figured that the vent line was clogged, or there was some kind of an error there. So they go into the fuel tank. I get my light in front of the camera there. They go into the fuel tank, which is right here, and there's the fuel tank right there, and it's held in place. It's actually, the fuel tank is mounted to this steel skid plate, and it's got 3 bolts in the front that mount to that cross member on the frame rail, and it has a line of bolts back here. Now, the skid plate that we had actually had been used as a skid plate. That they had skidded across some things with it going off-roading, and actually wore holes in it in the original skid plate. And they wore enough holes in it that they actually wore a hole in the gas tank itself. And the previous owner had told us that when we bought the vehicle, that he had replaced the gas tank because it leaked. After we saw the holes in the skid plate, we kind of figured out why it leaked. So when he replaced the fuel tank, he replaced it with a 15-gallon tank instead of a 20-gallon tank. It's just whatever he could find off another Jeep. The difference between the two is the length of the vent line inside the tank. So on a 15-gallon tank, the vent line comes down at an angle, and so it's a little over 9 inches long. And when it comes down at an angle, 9 inches long, the bottom of that hose is kind of down pretty far from the top of the tank. On the 20-gallon tank, that line is only 3 inches long, so it barely sticks out the top corner at all. And that allows the extra 5 gallons in the tank. It gives you more room above the end of the vent line, because the end of the vent line there is where the fuel pump shuts off when you're filling it up with fluid. So we had it all apart. We took the skid plate down, and we took the tank down and cleaned it all out, emptied it out. We hooked a line up where we had the fuel filter disconnected and shorted the relay to just pump the gas out, which is a handy trick so that you're not trying to lift a full gas tank full of gas. They get pretty heavy. So yeah, we ordered a new gasket for the sending unit, and we ordered a new skid plate from Warrior Products. So this is a powder coated skid plate. It's thicker than the original, but it's shaped just like the original one. Looks a lot like the original one, it's just sturdier, and the powder coat's nice and durable, which I like. I'm pretty happy with it. It's heavier than original, as you could expect of a more durable item. And we also ordered a new rubber liner. I don't know if you can see it here very well, but there's a kind of a rubber sound deadener pad that goes between the skid plate and the fuel tank. And I ordered that from Detroit Muscle Technologies, which is a great supplier of gaskets for the muscle car, MOPAR muscle cars and things like that I like to work on. And they do have some cheap parts too, so I was happy to be able to order from them because they make some great stuff. Okay, so the fuel lines and everything, get here where we can see it, they're coming out right here. And that's not really quite where they're supposed to come out at. They're supposed to come out across that cross member up top, closer to the dirty Jeep body that you see there. And they don't, because the body mounts have compressed a bit. We need to replace the body mounts on this. Oftentimes when you do that, the bolts break, and it's kind of a nightmare to do that on an old vehicle. So we put that off till later, and the hoses are just running down here. Now, someone else had replaced these hoses before, and they used hoses that weren't rated for fuel, which isn't good, of course. And so I wanted to replace the hoses with hoses that were actually meant for fuel. So I've done that. I routed them the same way that they did, so that they wouldn't be pinched by the compressed body mount. And that's working out pretty well. I had to make a standoff, this shiny part right here. Can't really point because I'm holding the light. Let's see, maybe I can put the light in the same hand as the camera here. Okay, so here's the standoff I had to make to keep the hose off of the edge of the skid plate. And I also put this trim on it right here so it won't ride up against it or anything. Now it's got a soft rubber edge. While I'm here, these studs right here, that right there, that's a stud that goes in a piece of angle iron, and there's 3 of those studs. That's what holds the front of the skid plate. And these right here, this is for anti-lock brakes. So this piece of angle iron just kind of holds the wiring for this anti-lock brake stuff. And one of the studs is broke on that, so I need to find a new one of those, and I'll probably have it powder coated with the other stuff, and then I'll just you know, put a jack under here and swap that part out. No big deal. We really don't have much rust on this vehicle at all, but there was a little bit here around these 2 rear body mounts, this one and the one on the other side. So we went ahead and cleaned them off and Rust-Oleumed them just for a temporary fix. At some point we'll probably, you know, do a full frame off and powder coat everything and clean it up good, but we're not ready for that right now. We need to get it back on the road. Here's your wiring connector for the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit with the gauge. It tells you how full the tank is. Yeah, so we had all that off. This little line right here, this is a fuel tank vent line that goes up to your charcoal canister. It was totally disconnected, and so I've put that back on and hooked it up. And I made sure all the vents work and tested the fuel sending unit. The gas gauge itself in the vehicle didn't work when we got it. So the gas gauge would work at the top half of the gauge, but once it got down to half a tank, then it would just stop at half a tank, and you wouldn't actually know how much gas you had below that. It turns out what was going on is that there's a plastic baffle inside the tank to keep the fuel from sloshing away from the bottom of the fuel pump when you go around a corner. And that had actually warped from the fuel. Apparently the factory didn't use the right kind of plastic. It's a factory problem in a lot of these Jeeps. And so it had warped over, and it was actually preventing the fuel float from coming down. So whenever you had less gas than that in the tank, you wouldn't know it. So we had been using the trip meter to tell how far we'd gone and how much gas that we had used. So I hooked the fuel sending unit up and worked on fixing that, and actually trimmed that baffle so that the float would clear. New sending unit gasket, soldered a new ground on the sending unit. Just kind of, you know, fixing it up. Put some new loom on it wherever the loom was cracked for the wiring, to protect the wiring. Tested it all out with my electrical meter. Just gave it a thorough run through and put it back together. While I had it out, there's some other things that I fixed. Let me go back under here for a second. So this is the rear end, the differential. And that tag you see, oops, I guess it's on the top of the screen for you, not the left. Hard to turn that way. Don't have much ground clearance here. Alright, so that tag tells you the part number and the gear ratio and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this cover was leaking on the differential, and so we took that off and cleaned it and painted the cover and put a new gasket on it. Lube locker gasket. I like the gasket pretty much. It's a reusable gasket, so you don't have to scrape sealer every time you maintenance the rear end. Put new oil in it. I'm sure that was a good thing to do. It's another thing that we hadn't, you know, ever done since we got the Jeep. So, and we'd had it for, I think, 5 years now. So, or almost 5 years. 5 years this Thanksgiving. Another thing that we had to do was exhaust brackets. We didn't have any exhaust brackets, hold downs, isolators from, we had one at the front by the transmission, but we didn't have any of the ones to the rear of that. So the exhaust was just sort of bouncing on that track bar right there, just making a lot of racket. Kind of annoying. There's one of the new isolators. You might be able to see the other one on the right there. Yeah, anyway, there's two that hang there, so we put those on. And the exhaust bracket at the back of the engine, or not back of the engine, back of the Jeep, here we go. This is the one that was on it when we got it. It's been welded on right here, where this piece is supposed to be on the exhaust pipe. The exhaust has been replaced, so it has a new one. But the bracket is missing. It was missing the rubber isolator, and it was missing the loop that's supposed to hold the isolator on, and someone had just welded the exhaust straight to the bracket. So I wanted to get a new hanger that had all the pieces that wasn't welded on, and you know, that worked like it was supposed to. So I do have that. I tracked it down, and I undid the bolts up there that hold it on, and I had to actually drill out a broken bolt and tap new threads in it. And so I have the replacement bracket. I'm going to get it powder coated with the other parts and put it on at some point. The original one is just sort of wired up here with a junkyard isolator to hold it in the meantime. So still wobbles a bit, but I have the part. That'll go on soon. Okay, so exhaust, fuel. Finally got it all back together, and we went for a test drive again. So that was all right. It worked pretty well. We went and had dinner, and then after leaving dinner, we went to drive it around a little bit more. You know, it's a test drive. We're supposed to check it out. And we had a bad vibration. Turns out that we busted a U-joint while we were test driving. So this front one right here busted out. It broke the drive shaft, and it damaged the yoke. And we weren't going anywhere. So we towed it back home again and tracked down another drive shaft and another yoke and put new U-joints in it. That was a little bit of work. Luckily I have a press, and got it back on the road again. Now, before we did the drive shaft, we did wheel weights, because I mentioned wheel weights at the beginning of this video. So, because the sticky weights were falling off, what we did was we went with a bead product. It goes inside the tire. You remove the valve stem core, and you pour the beads in. They go in pretty slowly because it's a small hole. And then you put the valve stem core back in and air it up. So centrifugal force makes the beads, you know, by weight, they go to where they need to go to balance the tire out. Now, you can't do that with little car tires because they have some ribs inside the tire that prevent the beads from moving. But with bigger tires, you know, truck tires, especially semis or just, you know, regular trucks, you can do that. So I thought I'd try it out. I haven't ever messed with them before, and put them in here, and it seems to be working. It didn't really seem to be working at first because we had the drive shaft issue that we weren't aware of. But after busting the drive shaft and replacing it, it's working much better. So the source of our vibration was about everything that could possibly go wrong for vibrations. Like everything that could be loose and shaking was. It's just a 27-year-old vehicle. And now we've gone through it, and it drives much better. So, what else did I replace? Oh, yep. Yeah, I really got ahead of myself with the drive shaft part of the story. That was the last thing we fixed. So while we still had the fuel tank out, we were putting that back together and everything. The shift linkage is this one right here, this rod. So that's the shift linkage, and it goes to, you might even be able to see it there. It goes to that lever, which goes to a shaft that goes down inside the transmission. So when you shift the gears up top, it moves this lever, and it moves that lever, and the transmission changes gears. So there's an oil seal that's around that shaft where it comes out of the transmission. And the purpose of that seal is to keep the oil inside the transmission. And it broke. So we just had transmission fluid running down the driveway. It was kind of difficult to get it out of there. What I ended up having to do was to drop the oil pan. So you took all these bolts out, dropped the oil pan, and that's the same thing that you would do if you wanted to change the transmission oil or the filter. So it's kind of a, you know, regular maintenance kind of thing. But then I had to go a step further, and I had to drop the valve body, which is, I think, 10 more bolts. So I dropped the valve body down, and then I was able to knock the seal out because that shaft is attached to the valve body. Then I was able to knock the seal out and put it all back together and get the new seal in place. So that helped. Now we don't have a transmission leak anymore, which is good. It had a small transmission leak since we got it, and we thought it was one of these lines, transmission cooler lines, but it turns out it was that shaft seal, and you know, the leak just got worse until we fixed it, and now it's better. So the transmission pan had actually been punctured before by one of the previous off-roading owners, and had been welded up. Didn't hurt anything inside because there wasn't anything there except oil. But while I had the pan off, I went ahead and put a new pan that hadn't been welded on the Jeep, and another lube locker gasket here. Again, I like reusable gaskets, so you don't have to scrape all that RTV sealer or anything like that, or buy new gaskets every time. You just keep using it. No trouble searching for parts that way. We did have to take the front drive shaft loose to get to that seal, to get everything installed like we were supposed to, and luckily that came loose no problem. It needs a transmission mount, but we can't really do that without dropping the skid plate. So that requires removing these, and they're not all in the greatest shape. So you see that one's not even there. And so I'm not willing to take that apart right this second. But that's coming up. But we did end up replacing the engine mounts. They were also shot. So we had some vibration caused by bad engine mounts. We got the new brackets that go on the engine and the new mount itself, and these are Brown Dog brand, which is, I'm very happy with them. They're way sturdier than the originals. We found out that this engine is actually out of a 1988, so it's not the original engine, which is interesting. I'm sure the fuel injection stuff off of it on the top and everything is original, and the transmission seems to be original, transfer case is original, you know, all that. It is a real 1994 Sahara Jeep Wrangler, but looks like the lower end of the engine's been swapped out at some point. Okay, so yeah, we did the mount on this side too. I don't know if you can see the yellow down there, but that was a lot harder to get to on this side. You take the airbox out, and you do most of it from the bottom over here. Other than that, we changed the transfer case oil in the four-wheel drive when we did the rear drive shaft, because we had the slip yoke out. And I think that's about it. I guess not. There's always something else to do. We put this hood seal on. So the hood seal, you can see here, it sticks to this, sticks to the vertical edge, not to the horizontal edge. And that's so that when this flat edge comes down, it squeezes against that and seals this gap between the hood and the cowl. And the reason that you want to do that is because this cowl vent right here, this is your fresh air intake for the passenger compartment. So you don't want your engine smells coming through this gap and being sucked into the passenger compartment. So that's the purpose of that seal. And the other thing we fixed here was the hood light. You can see we have a hood light now. We had part of it before. It was busted, and we took it apart when we painted the Jeep and found a new one, but never really got it installed. So when I was doing all the wiring here with the cables and the grounds and all that stuff, I went ahead and installed the new hood light, and it works great. It has a mercury switch, so it shuts off whenever the hood's closed. There were some extra accessory wires that previous owners had ran to power some things. One of them was for something that's no longer installed, and the other one was bypassing the ignition switch for the cigarette lighter, I guess so that you could run something while the Jeep key wasn't in it. You're not sure why they did it exactly. But I hooked the cigarette lighter back up the way it's supposed to be hooked up and removed the wires that don't go to anything. And that cleaned up some more mess under the hood. Okay, this time I think that's about it. Really this time. Right? You're not going to break Jeep, are you? Okay. So after that, we went on another test drive. We filled the back seat back here up with alligators and went to deliver them to the Speedway at New Smyrna Beach for the children's quarter midget racing team. They're going to be trophies for the winners of the race. So that was a lot of fun. We go to deliver some alligators in the Jurassic Park Jeep to a Speedway, and they let us drive on the Speedway. So we got to, you know, thoroughly test drive it there. I think that's it. That's what I've been up to. Took about a month and a half to get through all of that. And you should be seeing some more videos on my channel soon. Thanks for tuning in. Hope this was entertaining and that you enjoyed the Jeep. You've probably seen me talk about it before in some of my other videos. But now you finally get to see it, right? Catch you later. Thanks for tuning in.